Hey folks, little update on the bike. I think the last video I made was about getting the seat unit and fitting it. Well, the seat unit is now on. It's actually permanently on, fixed in place. Fixed it with some brackets that I made, some aluminium brackets. It's difficult to see in there because it's kind of dark, but there's basically brackets there supporting the seat unit, bolted on there and there. It's pretty solid, feels pretty solid. It's not kind of going anywhere, there's no give in it, so that's fine. And another couple of bolts, one in that side. They go into the original mounts on the subframe. That's pretty much it. It's basically got 4 bolts holding it on. Had to trim it a bit to get the seat to fit. These kind of edges here kind of interfere with the seat, so I've had to cut them to get the seat to fit with it. This kind of curve here kind of fits quite well between the seat and the seat unit. As you can probably tell, the seat's not really designed for the seat unit, so that's why I've had to modify it a bit. It kind of looks a bit rubbish at the moment because these bits stick up the side of the seat. That doesn't matter because I'm just going to chop those off, and then there's a bit of a gap there, but I'll just fill that in. Just put some kind of sheet aluminium in there and just rivet it in and just, you know, paint over it. It should look okay, hopefully. I had to cut the front end down a bit as well. The front ends of the seat unit, the Blackbird seat unit, kind of sticks forward like that. So I hacksawed them off and it kind of goes on. Unfortunately, I'm kind of left with this kind of kink here, but it's not too bad. I don't think it looks too bad overall. I think I like the shape of the Blackbird seat unit. I like how it's kind of like aerodynamic and kind of like swept up to the back like that. I think that looks pretty cool. Excuse me. So that's kind of the good news. The good news is it's on and it sort of fits. The bad news is I scraped my paint on the chassis when I was putting it on because of these bits here. I tried it on first, and on this edge here it's scraped the paint off, so that's another bit that I'm going to have to touch up once the bike's kind of finished, but never mind, not too worried about that. So the seat itself kind of fits. Like I say, at the back end it kind of fits to the seat unit. The front end kind of fits to the tank, but it kind of had like bits kind of sticking forward like this, kind of bit of a point on it. So what I did was pulled out the staples from the back, peeled back the leather, and then I cut the foam down like that with a Stanley knife, and then I got the tin snips and I cut through the hard plastic. Like most motorcycle seats, it's hard plastic underneath, then foam, then leather, and the leather's like pulled over the side and stapled down around there. So once I cut the foam and the hard plastic back, I basically pulled the leather back and then stapled it back to the sort of underneath, so just pulled it back a bit tighter, if you know what I mean, and it kind of gives that sort of edge there, which doesn't look, I don't know, in some ways it doesn't look quite right, but the thing is it kind of fits better with the tank because this curve here kind of is about right for the tank, and before these kind of like pointy bits were pushing the whole seat away from the tank, so you're getting like a big gap around there. So basically cutting those corners off has enabled me to push the seat and the tank right up to each other, or pretty much right up to each other. They could still go a bit tighter together, I think, but basically kind of fits at this stage. So that's kind of the seat and the seat unit. The seat isn't properly attached at the moment. I haven't figured out how I'm going to attach it. At the moment it's just got like bungee cords just put through the kind of hoops on the underneath of the seat and just like clipped onto the seat unit. That's what's holding the seat in place. The reason for that is I just wanted to get the seat on just to see, you know, kind of that it all fits and it all kind of goes together. The tank is in place, but it's not fitting quite right because the the mounting that I made for the tank, which is basically like a kind of metal box that supports it at the back, and it's got a bolt that goes down into the into the subframe, and another bolt that goes up the way into the tank. But the problem is the box is a bit too big, and it's holding the tank up off the chassis, and that means you've got like a really big gap there. So what I need to do is I need to weld a smaller kind of box, a bit kind of shorter, because it kind of like digs into this bit of tank here is kind of sloping, and the corner of the box is kind of digging into it, and that's what's holding the tank up. So if I make a smaller kind of box, like narrow it that way, then the tank will sit down onto the chassis a bit better, and it'll also sit a bit better with the seat because it'll be lower relative to the seat. So that's kind of that. Tank, seat unit and seat, kind of at least got some idea how they're all going together now. I'm kind of started working on that. So so the other thing that I've been working on is the rear sets. I got these rear sets off eBay. They're 50 quid per side, and includes the footrest, the gear connector rod thingy there, the rear set itself, and this kind of heel plate. So obviously they're second hand, so they're not kind of like, you know, they're not shiny new like the ones I got before, but at least they fit, you know. So I've bolted them on with a couple of Allen bolts. I still need to tighten them to the correct torque, but at least they're installed and they're in place anyway. So that's that. So it's kind of like taking shape a bit, you know. You've got some body work, got some rear sets, starting to look a bit like a bike, you know. So that's the one on the other side there. The plan was to replace the master cylinder for the rear brake, but unfortunately the master cylinder that I've got doesn't line up with the two holes on here, which is a bit of a pain. So it means I've needed to fit it with the old master cylinder, but as far as I can tell it still works okay. So I don't know, you can't really tell because the back brake's not installed yet, but as far as I can tell that should work okay. And then I just need to connect up the back brake. That's the back brake hose. But I've also got a braided hose and a new rear caliper, well, like a new second-hand rear caliper with the rear sets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that. This is just like a normal kind of rubber hose, so I'm going to take that off. I'm going to put the braided hose on, and then we'll just have braided hose for the back brake as well as the front. So that'll be braided hoses all round. There's also this bit that came with it, which is brake light switch, which I never even thought about that, but I got one of these included with the rear set, so that's fine. So just install that when I'm putting the brake together. I think I'll probably do the rear brake tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. So I've also got a whole bunch of kind of other bits in the post today. This is a sheet of steel. This is basically for a few different jobs. It's to make the battery box, and also to possibly make a new tank mount, or I might just modify the existing tank mount, I don't know, we'll see. So battery box, possibly tank mount, and possibly also might be used for making a bracket for the headlights, as I've been having problems getting the headlights to go on, but that's another story. Maybe make a video about that at some point. So what else have I got? I've got some other bits and pieces in the post today. I got this is CBR 900 throttle. I got a quick action throttle, but I couldn't get it to work with the CBR 900 cables. It didn't really go together. I think I made a video about that before, I can't remember. This one's kind of scruffy and dirty. I don't know if you can see in the video, but the grip is in a pretty bad state, but it doesn't matter because the throttle itself is okay, and I can just replace the grip. I've actually got some foam grips that I can put on, so that's fine. So that's the throttle, so I can install that as soon as I get a chance. I've got some electrical tape, just PVC electrical tape off eBay. That's just to tidy up the loom a bit, because the loom is a bit kind of shabby, you know, it's kind of wires hanging out here and there, so I've got some black tape that I can put around it just to finish it off a bit. Just a couple of rolls of that should be plenty, you know. I got these fuel hoses. There's a 10mm, an 8mm and a 6mm hose. These are to do the fuel system, to connect the tank to the filter, and the filter to the fuel pump, and the fuel pump to the carburetors. Because basically it's half a metre of each, so it should be plenty, I think, hopefully. So that's the fuel hoses, and then here we've got the clocks. These are the digital clocks. All of this stuff is off eBay as well. Just because basically I haven't bothered to look anywhere else, but there we go. So these are the digital clocks. Obviously I can't actually switch them on and try them at this stage because they need to be connected to a battery. But from what I can tell, they look okay. It's a rev counter. Again, I don't know if you can see in the video, but it says like times 1,000 revs per minute. I think how it works is it's difficult to show this, hang on a second. I think this line here is the rev counter, and then the speed will be somewhere down here, and it'll have all the other bits and pieces like the warning lights and what have you. So I think I need to work out how I'll attach them, but they kind of look okay anyway. I think they'll go alright with the headlights that I've got. They're kind of streamlined. So I'm quite pleased with them. I think they should be fine, assuming they work okay. So that's pretty much it. So got the clocks, got the fuel hose, got the throttle, got the rear sets. Try to think. There's other things that I'm waiting for to be delivered. Try to think what else I'm waiting for. I can't actually remember just now, but I know there's other bits that I'm waiting. Oh, I know, one of the things is the bottom for the tank, which includes the fuel filter and the fuel pump. I'm waiting for that to be delivered, so when that's delivered, that means I've got all the bits to put the fuel system together, because I've already got a fuel pump and a fuel filter. So between the hoses, the tank bottom, the pump and the fuel filter and the carburetors, I can basically get the entire fuel system together, which is pretty good because that's another kind of tick off the list. And obviously get the throttle on as well. Oh, I know, the other thing that I've ordered is a flexible radiator hose. This is kind of another story. Discovered that, well, I kind of noticed that this bit here, the bottom of the bottom mounting on the radiator, I reckon is going to hit the mudguard or possibly even the tyre when you go over big bumps. Because if you look at the fork traveller is something like, I don't know, whatever that is, about 4 inches or something. Well, if you look at 4 inches there, that's nowhere near 4 inches, that's about 2 inches or less. So if I hit a big pothole, the back of my tyre's going into that mount. Obviously I don't want that to happen, so what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to move my radiator back a bit. So the radiator is going to need to tilt back like that, so that it's almost against the exhausts, because there's kind of a gap at the moment. Also the fan's going to need to move up, because the fan is kind of like between the exhaust and the radiator, so that needs to go up to the top here, which I can do. There's room to move it up, and then once it's moved up, that gives me enough space to move the radiator back. But the problem with that is this design that I built here with the radiator hose, this is going to put a kink in here, because this bit you can feel there's already a slight beginning of a kink there, and if I move it back, that's going to totally kink that radiator hose. So what I've done is I've found some stuff, some special radiator hose on eBay. I forget what it's called. I think it's like it's some acronym. It's like EPDM or something like that, or EPDM. I can't remember. But anyway, it's like super flexible radiator hose. It's like it's kind of, I don't know how to describe it, it's got kind of rings around it, and it's completely flexible, so you can completely like tie it in a knot. So what I've done is I've ordered some of that. It wasn't too much, it was about 15 quid or something. So the plan is to run that from the pump at the bottom to the radiator, and if it's flexible enough it should be able to cope with that kind of like S-bend. It's basically an S-bend there that you're talking about, especially when you move the radiator back. With the radiator kind of sloping back like that, you're talking about a real kind of S shape from the bottom of the radiator around the alternator casing and onto the bottom of the pump. So realistically I can't do that with joints the way that I've done it there, so it's going to have to be the flexible hose. So when I get that, I'm hoping to get that by the end of the week, and then I'll redo the cooling system. Oh, that was the other thing that happened. When I filled the cooling system with antifreeze, it all ran out underneath. And the reason for that, I realised, is when I actually looked at it, I saw that it's actually the water joint. Again, you probably can't see it on the video because it's too dark, but in there's like a water joint, which this hose here, the hose from the water pump, connects onto the engine block, and it's basically the water was leaking out there, and it just ran completely, it just ran straight out. You know, I poured antifreeze on top of the radiator and it just came straight out on the floor. So the reason is that I hadn't put an O-ring in there. I just put some Granville instant gasket, which has worked okay in the past, but it didn't work in this case. So I'm going to have to take it off, strip it out, and put in a proper O-ring. So I've ordered an O-ring from the Honda dealers, so I'm going to go and get that at the weekend and install that, and then hopefully should be able to fill it with antifreeze and do all the bits and pieces of the radiator and hoses at the same time. It's a bit of a pain in the neck that's going to happen, but to be honest, it's better that it happens at this stage than kind of happens when I'm out on the road sometimes. So anyway, too much talk. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks.